All television and radio stations in the United States will now cease their regular programming.
Trump says the United States should team up with Russia to solve global issues, which is really the focal point of the architecture of the New World Order that the Kenites are building, merging the United States and Russia together. But the New World Order will not emerge until the woe of the fifth trumpet, when Satan and his angels are cast from heaven unto the earth. That's when that one world political system finally comes into being, and it'll have a mouth as the mouth of a lion. That's the Christian nation, headed by the United States, and feet as the feet of a bear, which is symbolic of the non-Christian nations, headed by Russia, China being part of the bear also because they're a communistic, atheistic nation. Not a Christian nation, but a communistic nation. The bear would then include the other non-Christian nations, which would include the Arab nations as well. So Korea is the bridge to merging the United States and China is the bridge to merging the United States and Russia. The United States, along with the other Christian nations, is the king of the south of Daniel chapter 11, and the king of the north then is the non-Christian nations headed by Russia or Esau. This you can trace all the way back to Genesis chapter 25, where the two twin brothers struggled together in their mother's womb, Jacob and Esau. And as God said in that chapter, 2 nations are in your womb, he said to their mother. And then in Genesis chapter 27, Esau, whose name was Edom, which means red, was cursed to always live away from the fat of the land, and also by his sword shall he live, as it's written in Genesis chapter 27. You need to look into the original Hebrew to see it correctly translated. That's a curse in Genesis 27 placed on Esau, not the blessing that was placed on Jacob. The sword Esau was cursed to live by is symbolized by the sickle, which is the symbol of the Soviet Union. And if the Soviet Union is no more and they're no longer communistic, then riddle me this. Why in heaven's name do they still have a hammer and sickle on the top of their parliament building, which is called the Russian Duma? And why is the Communist Party of the Russian Federation part of their government? Also, anything major that Red China does, Russia is right there along with them, and vice versa. China being openly communistic, Red China as they call it, with Russia pretending to no longer be a communistic nation. But again, look at their Duma. Why is there a hammer and sickle there? And why is the Communist Party of the Russian Federation 1/4 of their government? So the bear of Daniel 7 is the Confederacy written of in Ezekiel chapter 38, headed by Russia, not the Christians of Russia, but the atheistic communistic system. The lion symbolizes the Christian nations up until 666, and then they're no longer Christian nations, being plucked up by the roots. That you'll find written in Daniel 7 as well, those 3 Christian nations plucked up by the roots whenever Satan appears as the false Christ, because whenever a Christian nation begins to worship the devil, they're no longer a Christian nation. They're worshiping Antichrist, not the true Christ, and so they're pulled up by the roots. The leopard in Daniel chapter 7 is symbolic of the Kenites and their 4 hidden dynasties, the infrastructure of the New World Order, and at this time, the he-goat of Daniel chapter 8 symbolizes the shadow government of the Kenites. The deep state, as they're called nowadays, or the Illuminati, that's what that is symbolic of. The he-goat, the sons of Cain, and their shadow government, which puts together the skeletal structure of the one world political system, but it doesn't emerge until the woe of the fifth trumpet. That's when the he-goat becomes the leopard of Daniel chapter 7. At the woe of the fifth trumpet, whenever Satan and his angels, Daniel's 4th beast, which is the supernatural, are cast from heaven unto the earth, and that's when the New World Order finally emerges. So what we see going on now with China is the strategy outlined on page 231 of Henry Kissinger's book, World Order. Will it be possible to merge the concerns and goals of the two sides, the United States and China, over Korea? Are China and the United States able to work out a collaborative strategy for a denuclearized, unified Korea that leaves all parties more secure and more free? It would be a big step toward the new type of great power relations so often invoked and so slow in emerging. The New World Order is what he's talking about there. The book is called World Order. So again, Korea is the bridge to merging the United States and China is the bridge to merging the United States and Russia. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who wrote The Grand Chessboard, who died earlier this year, but before his death, he said in Russian media earlier this year, if America and China cooperate, Russia has absolutely no choice but to join, and we just saw the U.S. and China sign $250 billion worth of business deals this past week. So that's a big step in that direction, and as Kissinger said on October 10th, while seated next to Trump in the White House in the Oval Office, the opportunity to build a constructive, peaceful world order is very great. Kissinger also said back in August that ISIS was keeping Iran in check and warned Trump not to let Iran fill the void. And here in this article from Kenite-occupied Israel National News, as I call it, we find out Trump wrote a letter to Netanyahu saying, together, we will confront Iran. So just as ISIS is all but defeated in Syria, tension mounts in Lebanon as Saudi Arabia escalates power struggle with Iran, which appears to be following the Kissinger World Order strategy as well. And notice in Ezekiel chapter 38 that Persia is listed there. That's Iran. With Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, being Russia, Meshech being Moscow, and Tubal being Tobolsk. That word chief in the Hebrew is Rosh, as in Russia. That red nation, and if you don't think it's Russia, why then was Mount Seir, which is Esau, mentioned just prior to Ezekiel chapter 38 and Ezekiel chapter 35? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, but God hated Esau and he loved Jacob. The Battle of the Valley of Hamon-Gog that's written of in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 will not take place until the end of the 5-month-long hour of temptation, whenever the true Christ returns. That's when that happens, at the exact same time as the Battle of Armageddon. Some other things happening with Saudi Arabia you may want to take note of are listed in this Zero Hedge article, and the main elements currently in play are these: a sudden and intense purging of powerful Saudi insiders, arrests, death, and asset seizures, huge changes in domestic policy and strategy, a shift away from the United States in all respects, politically, financially, and militarily, deepening ties to China, a surprising turn towards Russia economically and militarily because they're a non-Christian nation, increasing cooperation and alignment with Kenite-occupied Israel, another non-Christian nation. So it's really not all that complicated. In the New World Order that emerges at the woe of the fifth trumpet, the lion symbolizes the Christian nations and the bear symbolizes the non-Christian nations. When this one-world political system is wounded to death, Satan will appear as the false Christ in the middle of that 5-month-long hour of temptation at the sixth seal, the sixth trumpet, and the sixth vial. And that's when the lion and the bear actually merge together in a one-world religious system, because those Christian nations will no longer be Christians. They'll be devil worshippers. Only God's elect will remain outside of Satan's system, being the many-membered body of Christ at that time. Most Christians will have died spiritually and ceased to be the virgin bride of Christ, which is the many-membered body, and will become the whore of Babylon. That means they're not virgins anymore, spiritually speaking, and will become the many-membered body of Antichrist. This is why those 3 ribs are in the mouth of the bear, as you can read of in Daniel chapter 7 as well, because it's then that the Christian nations will become one with the communistic. They're no longer Christian nations, in other words. They're pulled up by the roots, as it's also written in Daniel chapter 7, at the sixth trumpet whenever Satan appears as Antichrist. So when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, be ye not troubled, for the end is not yet, as Christ said in Mark 13 as well as other places. It's when the New World Order actually emerges, that first beast written of in Revelation 13 having 7 heads and 10 horns, the 10 horns being part of Daniel's 4th beast. That has to be here first, because those 10 horns are 10 fallen angel kings that reign 1 hour with the beast. the hour of temptation, which was 7 years, but it's been shortened to a 5-month period. It won't be until after the false Christ appears in Jerusalem at the 6th trumpet that the true Christ returns at the 7th trumpet. It's really just that simple. For more information, go to Mark13Records.com, because as Christ said in the last verse of Mark chapter 13, "What I say unto you, I say unto all, watch."